Hello friends, this is Jim with Science Talk. Quick little video discussing potential causes for what's been now known as the Little Ice Age. Now, scientists can't really agree on when the Little Ice Age started or it even ended. It's generally believed to have lasted into the 19th century, at least at the beginning of it, at the latest, let's put it that way. But still, in Northern Europe, did experience some cooling down temperatures, even to the point where the Thames River in London froze. And there are paintings of people on the frozen river, people skating on the canals in the Netherlands, that kind of fun stuff. And it's thought that places far away as South America and China might have also cooled down. What caused the Little Ice Age? Scientists are not sure, but there's some hypotheses. One of the hypotheses that came out in 2012 is the idea of a period lasting half a century of just huge, massive, at least 4 of them, tropical volcanic eruptions. So you're throwing all this material into the atmosphere. You're throwing CO2, SO2, sulfur dioxide, which at first the CO2 can trap heat, but after a while, depending, it could keep trapping heat and you have a runaway greenhouse effect like on Venus, or the SO2 can really cool things down. And depending on the dynamics, the fluid dynamics of the atmosphere, the CO2 can also work to, can be so thick that you either have a runaway greenhouse below it, or it just simply reflects most of the sunlight energy away so that things can cool down. So it can go one of 2 ways. Sunlight energy, it's thick, but still the sunlight energy can penetrate through to the surface and be trapped, or not. And if it's the former, it heats up. The latter, it cools down. SO2 will definitely cool things down. And then, of course, you have actual ash and dust and other particulate matter, which will block out the sun. And of course, you're blocking out the sun, you're going to cool things down. So that's one hypothesis. And the scientists with the volcano theory at the University of Colorado Boulder, along with co-authors from the National Center for Atmospheric Research, also in Boulder, and it's called NCAR. And you have the National Snow Ice Data Center, NSIDC. You have a whole bunch of government agencies, NOAA as well, in Boulder, all doing scientific research. So these folks here have evidence for volcanic eruptions between 1275 and 1300 AD. They say these volcanoes triggered a chain reaction affecting sea ice and ocean currents in a way that lowered temperatures for centuries. These results are in contrast to the work of other scientists who contend that the decreased radiation from the sun is what caused the Little Ice Age. Those advocating for volcanic eruptions, their work was published in the January 2012 issue of Geophysical Research Letters. So I want to pull up this chart here. So what do we see here on the vertical axis? Temperature anomaly. Now what that means is 0 would be the average temperature. So anything above the 0 would be warmer than average. Anything below the 0 would be cooler than average. So if you see, it looks like here's the 0 line. And basically, you're going to say, well, most of the graph is below the 0. So what's going on here? Cooler than usual? Well, that's because look at this end of things, right? The average temperature, thanks to the start of the Industrial Revolution, of the planet has been increased dramatically. In fact, if you look at it, and the different color lines from different data sets analyzing it, but you can see that for the most part they're in agreement. And you see this this bingo. Look at the sharp rise right here, and that's right there. It kind of starts right about there, and if you drop that line down, that's about 1900. turn of the 20th century. And right about here is sort of like the start of the Industrial Revolution. So you can see here's a nice strong signal of what humans are doing. So when you look at this, these this is where it's cold, this is where it's a little warmer, and here's little ice age. You can see it dips down the lowest, almost to a full degree, 9/10 of a degree below the average, and it kind of wallowed around here. And as you can see, it's in the late 1500s, and you can say that it looks like it's from about 1550 to maybe, depending if you want to look at that data set, what have you, to about 1700, maybe 1750 or so. As I said at the outset, scientists can't agree on when it started, when it ended, really. But we can see you can see it definitely dipped down, and then we can see the spike as a result of humans' activities, burning the fossil fuels and warming the planet. So here's a gentleman who's collecting data. That's Gifford Miller, and he's on. Let me move that up there a bit. This is him on Baffin Island, which is in the within the Arctic Ocean area there, and Miller and his colleagues, they did radiocarbon dating of 150 samples of dead plant material with roots intact, collected from beneath the receding margins of ice caps on Baffin Island. And I love how they kill dates between 1275 and 1300 AD, indicating plants have been frozen and engulfed by ice during a relatively sudden event. And then there was a second spike in plant kill dates at about 1450, indicating the quick onset of a second major cooling event. So going back to this figure here, that's these kind of ups and downs. The cooling event, that kind of stuff, ups and downs that we see. They also looked at sediment cores from a glacial lake, okay, and the annual layers in the cores suddenly became thicker in the late 13th century, meaning that the accretion slowed down, and so that indicates the climate cooling. So the model that they're developing shows sustained cooling from volcanoes, and it might have expanded the Arctic sea ice down along the eastern coast of Greenland until it eventually melted in the North Atlantic. Now remember, sea ice itself contains almost no salt, right? Because of brine rejection. So when it melts into the surface water, then makes the surface water less dense, prevents it from from sinking and mixing. I discussed that with you folks quite a few times before. Now, here's the data that those who say changes in the output of the sun cause a little ice age. And they look at the number of sunspots. And there's this region, and you can see that these are the dates here from 1650, 1700 or so. They call this the Maunder minimum. Then there's a later Dalton minimum, and then here's some Marden maxima. So as you can see, there's the spikes, which is correlating to the 7-11-year cycle or so. And this is kind of a rough curvilinear function that's fit through the data. But if you look at the spike here, and there's not a lot of stuff going on here, but it does not explain what happened, in the late 1300s and 1400s. It does not explain that. Okay? And by this point here, right, there's still minimums. It's coming minimum, maximum. It's coming out of here, but we're still warming up. But anyway, they say that the number of sunspots, as the sunspot numbers decrease, the energy output from the sun also decreases. And they're citing that as the reason for this cooling down. Okay. So what the researchers did, for those who advocate such a position, they set the solar radiation at a constant level in their climate models, and they said the simulations indicated a little ice age likely would have occurred without decreased summer solar radiation at the time. Okay, so let me backtrack there a bit. So, those who are advocating the sunspots as causing the cooling does not account for everything. It doesn't account for the cooling in the 1300s and 1400s. It doesn't. When you look at the spike and the lows here, you're not getting sudden cooling. Now, granted, over here, this is sustained. There's almost a 50-year period where there seems to be almost no sunspot activity at all. But those who say the volcanoes are what it caused, they actually ran a model where they kept the solar radiation at a constant level, and they said the simulations indicated a little ice age likely would have occurred without decreased summer solar radiation at the time. So what's the bottom line? Is it the sunspot numbers decreasing causing cooling, or is it the volcanic activity? Well, right now, the data and the analyses are indicating it was volcanic activity. One other caveat that was not considered: AMOC. Right? Did the conveyor belt slow down? I've now discussed with you folks several times about the importance of the global conveyor belt as a heat distribution mechanism. I've discussed with you the mechanisms by which it forms and can slow down or shut down. I have seen some reports that indicate there was a dumping, if you will, of some fresh water into the North Atlantic on or about the start of the Ice Age. So I think further research is needed into that avenue of inquiry. So I've discussed a little Ice Age with you guys before, some of my very early videos, but kind of wanted to, this is kind of how science works, right? You have competing hypotheses, and you gather the information, analyze it, and present your case. And depending which, and by consensus, usually one mechanism or the other, or a combination, will be considered best explaining the observed data. And that's the whole point. Which of the model, which of the data best explains the observed data? Right now, it appears to be volcanism. So, till next time, take care. Hey folks, this is Jim here reminding you to subscribe to this channel, to share my videos, tell others of the work that I do here. I also ask that if you are not already a patron at Patreon, to please consider becoming a patron at Patreon. You can find the information in the description box below the video. I'm asking you to help support the work that I do. I do not take any money from corporations or from any other sources, so the information I share with you is the actual science as it comes out of the peer-reviewed journals. So there is no BS, there's no propaganda, there's no agenda. It's just I present the science and I explain to you what it means, or at least my interpretations of it, based on my own experience as a scientist. I want this channel to grow. I consider, while I discuss many different topics here, you notice I do focus a lot on climate issues. I consider climate change to be the most pressing issue facing humanity today. Thus, I consider it important to disseminate this information to a wider and wider, more and more people. And I need your help to do this. So, yes, please subscribe. Please tell others of the work that I do here. Please share my videos on social media platforms, with your social media groups, what have you. We need to get this information out there. So for those of you who are supporting me on Patreon, I thank you greatly for your support and continued support. It does mean a lot to me. So together we can get this information to more and more people. Thank you. Thank you for your support.